Hey there, it's Pete here, the editor. Just wanted to let you know that there are a few unfortunate audio issues with this episode, as our guest Sophia had a few issues with her microphone during the recording. It should still be a good one, so we hope you enjoy it.
Welcome, everyone, to the Rapid Reviews podcast, Roundtable episode 4. We are joined by a very special guest today, which we'll get to in a second. And today's topic will be about journalism and how it's changed through the years and, our thoughts and feelings on it as it applies today. So first, we'll just dive right into it. We have, as usual, my co-host, Pete.
Hello.
And Pete, you want to give a little bit of your background, your details, that sort of thing?
Of course, yep. So I am a review writer for Rapid Reviews UK, podcaster with you every week, as well as done some review writing and editorial pieces for Starburst magazine, which is a film-based UK magazine.
Right. We are also joined by Jen, known as Lady Sugar Cube. And tell us a little bit about yourself, Jen.
Hi. Thanks for having me again. My name is Jennifer. I'm 31 years old, located in good old Germany. Writing video games reviews since March 2018.
Yes.
I've been, on and off reviewing games ever since, but it's a big passion of mine, and I'd like to discuss that with you today. And besides reviewing, I stream a little bit. I am also part of the Caffeinated Bantercast, a podcast about, well, you guessed it, video games. And I'm also sometimes starring at the Rapid Reviews podcast and also writing for the site. So
Exactly. That's what I was about to say. You write for Rapid Reviews, but and you write for a few other outlets as well.
Also Mike Tender, 64, and also for a blog of my co-host Code Death, Walk in Shadows as well. Yeah.
Very good. And then we're joined by our very special guest that I'm very excited to introduce, Sophia. Sophia, tell us a little bit about yourself and where we can find you.
Hi, my name is Sophia Norritz. Thanks for having me on. And I can be found on Twitter at Sophnar0747, and I'm known as a writer of sorts, kind of somewhat sometimes. And I write for RT.com. I do a lot of stuff about game journalism in general, hence I'm here, and kind of detailing stuff about ethical sides of things. I write a lot of op-eds. I'm just kind of known for covering a variety of stuff. So I'm always bad at talking about myself.
I think we all are, really.
Yeah. But,
that's always the most awkward part of a podcast is, tell me about yourself. I'm a dork who sits at my computer all day. You just think I'm cool.
Hey, we all are. Don't tell our secret. But we're very, very pleased and excited that you were able to join us today because one of your op-ed pieces actually was an inspiration for us to just start roundtables in general, but more specifically this one. You can, like she mentioned, you can find her work on RT.com. I highly encourage you to go and check it out. And also follow her on Twitter, which we'll reiterate all that stuff towards the end.
And I will put it in the show notes as well.
Oh, absolutely. So we're going to just jump right in and start talking about good old games journalism. So, Pete, I'm going to let you go ahead and start things off with some of the stuff that you've it's come up a few times. It's kind of been on your radar, and
Okay, the first thing that I specifically wanted to bring up today was actually about a game that I'm very passionate about. It's the reason why I went to America last year to actually go to EVO just to go and compete, and went 0-2 in a tournament. It is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and Specifically, when Joker was released, the use of the Persona 5 music, which potentially could have included what Kotaku and particularly the writer Laura Kate Dale wrote, was potentially a disability slur, which, I mean, if you know anything about music, you know that the word in particular is nothing to do with a disability slur. And
Yes.
to the point where 24 hours later, although the original article is still up at the top of the page, they do have a "we screwed up with that Persona lyric" retraction, which, unusually, why would you keep the original article still up there? Which is one of my points of what I wanted to ask is, do you feel that when a mistake has happened, should the original article just disappear, or should it stay there so that you can read it for context, even though a mistake has happened?
I like that. Sophia, do you have any thoughts on getting rid of problematic articles, we'll say?
I think if you made a mistake and you express that you made a mistake, you should leave the original up so people can see your errors. I think when you start deleting stuff, you risk sweeping your errors under the rug, and that can create a problem in and out of itself. But I think if you're going to do that, like, hey, don't run ads on that page, find a way to stop them or do other things, but you need to own up to that mistake. The problem with a lot of these sites is that they'll say they made a mistake, but then the very next week they'll make the same mistake again in a different topic. Like, they don't learn from their errors, and that's where the problem comes in.
I agree.
As it pertains to Laura K. Dale, she is a very, and I really hate this word, but it sums her up. She's a very problematic writer in and out of herself, because she has a history of lying and slandering and coming up with absurd claims. And when I wrote at Niche Gamer, a place I kind of regret writing at, given what's come out since I left.
Okay.
Conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But I wrote an article about Laura K. Dale called "The Questionable Ethics of Laura K. Dale," and it came out right after the Persona. It was my reaction to that Persona article.
Okay.
And I'd been following her career for a while because I've had some issues with her for quite a while. And she, during a Xbox event many years ago, she lied about a comedian presenter on stage with her, misgendering her and calling her he, it, and thing.
Yes.
Because as some people know, Laura Dale is transgendered, like myself.
Yeah.
And it turns out that, I mean, she made a whole tweet. He called me he, it, thing, and she made this big deal. She got to write a Huffington Post piece, Kotaku, all the Daily Dot, all the typical sites came out to her defense about how that comedian was transphobic. Well, not long after, she retracted it, and it turns out that incident never happened. The comedian never called her he, it, or thing, and that right there should have stopped her career. She blatantly lied, slandered someone for that kind of woke politics side, victim points.
Yeah.
But yet she's continued to fail upwards since then. Like, she lied about being kidnapped at E3.
Oh God, yeah.
I remember that.
There's just so much absurd things she's lied about. So when she says she heard that R slur in the song, I don't for a second trust her.
No, I
She's
don't
always
either.
looking for reasons to lie about stuff and make up this stuff. And there's so many incidences in her career that she should have been ended way before that ever happened. So the apology means nothing when the game's media just continues to let her lie.
Which is an interesting point of why I'm glad you brought up the apology, because actually the apology wasn't even written by her. It was written by her editor, so she's not potentially even admitting to her own mistake. She's actually hiding behind her editor in that point, where the editors had to obviously step in and go, we're getting a lot of backlash about this. You need to write something about it. And she's either gone, no, I'm not writing that piece because I believe it to be true. In which case, okay, she's stuck by her convictions. I can respect that. But she still shouldn't be writing articles like that are very problematic when, in most respects, it really wasn't true. And she should own it, like, absolutely own it. But the interesting point that I wanted to bring up was at EGX in October in London. She was actually on stage giving a talk with a few other people in the games industry about I think it was feminism in games industry, and they were talking about Alex Kuoka quite a lot, and the fact that obviously like everyone should be believed and all of that sort of thing with Zoe Quinn, and yet it had mostly come out that Zoe Quinn had pretty much lied about everything, and they were still defending her, which I thought was pretty problematic, let's say, as well. So how does everyone feel about that now that that's been put on the table?
I think to add another dynamic real quick too is that it's worth knowing that Laura K. Dale and Zoe Quinn have some form of friendship, because Laura Dale is very much tied into Jim Sterling at this point because they work together on the weekly podcast.
Yeah, they do the Jim
And Jim-
Position podcast together, don't they?
And Jim Sterling has collaborated on a few projects with Zoe Quinn, including her failed Kickstarter game.
Oh dear.
And Zoe Quinn, Laura Dale is publishing a book later this year or next called something like About Mario's Butt. It's a book about video game butts.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Zoe Quinn wrote an essay for it, as did Jim Sterling, and this was a book that got pushed by IGN and other websites when it was in the crowdfunding stage. Like, they kind of have this relationship where they all just help each other out. So it doesn't matter what Zoe Quinn lied about, what Laura Dale lied about, because they're all friends, so they just keep helping each other out. So of course they're going to defend Quinn, because they'll never come out and condemn her for anything she's ever failed at.
I sense that there's almost a kind of protective blanket. I'm basically just going to reiterate what your own article said, which is there does seem to be a clique, and there seems to be a kind of I don't really want to relate it to current topics, but I'm going to. Something that comes up a lot currently now is how, like, police defend each other. They're hidden behind the thin blue line, that type of thing. There's almost a sense of that in gaming journalism today, and that if you don't fall under this protective blanket, you just kind of get lost by the wayside. And I definitely see that quite strongly in anyone that is connected to Zoe Quinn, anyone that has any kind of little spoke from her.
Yeah, I would say anyone that's associated with Zoe Quinn or Anita Sarkeesian tends to get that blanket of protection around them.
She's the head of the Hydra, so...
And that blanket extends to who's allowed to grow past problematic jokes of their past. You know, like until recently, I was a primary writer for Colin Moriarty, who many of the audience may know, was run out of the industry and is blacklisted widely because on A Day Without a Woman, he tweeted, some peace and quiet, like the most cliche dad joke there is. That's always existed.
Oh god!
And all these articles come out about how he's a misogynistic, he's sexist, he's bad. Meanwhile, you can go through all these journalists' pasts and find jokes that are way worse. Like, Colin has never said the N-word. There's no history of him ever saying the N-word. Yet people like Daniel Dwyer is excelling in this medium, and he has the past. Yeah. Or there's one of my nemesis, Jed Whittaker, who I'm fighting a DMCA claim against because I highlighted video where he tried to be satirical, quote unquote. He's saying a lot of bad words like the N-word, the derogatory C word towards women. And sorry if you can hear my cat meowing in the background. And he's even making jokes about rape. Wow. And he didn't get chased out of the industry. Meanwhile, again, Colin says, some peace and quiet. Like, the most daddest of dad jokes. And he is run out of the industry. It's this hypocrisy.
It's crazy because I would sit there and I'd go, okay, my girlfriend's out for the day. That is peace and quiet. Like, I think it's not gendered at all. It's not based on any sort of derision at all. It's just someone's out of the house. You've got an empty house. It is peace and quiet because there's no one there. It makes no sense.
But I specifically like that you mentioned in your article, and again here, Danny O'Dwyer. Being that I currently reside in Northern Ireland, I've been a fan of Danny O'Dwyer's for, I think, like 10 years now, way back when he did Random Encounters. And that early stuff is hair-raising. It is like, I remember listening to it at the time when I was a brand new American over here on the island of Ireland and going, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that. And then, my people around me, they're all Irish, and they're like, what? I don't understand. He's, referencing, African Americans. I'm like, that's just not what we say back home. That just feels weird. And then here we are 10 years later, and he is the almost the beacon for equality and non-racial or anti-racist type things. And it's like, have you does he acknowledge his past? Because I've never heard him acknowledge that. And I don't think that that's right, that he gets to call out other journalists without acknowledging his own past.
Yeah.
So, Jen, do you have any thoughts or feels towards that?
Yeah, also picking up what Sophia said with everyone being friends, and that in German there is a saying that goes, wer einmal lügt, dem glaubt man nicht, which roughly translates to, if you lie once, you'll never ever get anyone to believe you anymore. And that's the thing that gets swept under the rug quite frequently in the whole industry. They, like Sophia also said, get picked up every time from their friends because everyone is, friends with the doctor. And that's something that's not, I mean, it's good to back up your friends, but it also speaks volumes about yourself because you are in a field where you swore some sort that you are reporting on the truth. And if someone keeps repeating their mistakes that they did in the past, and people constantly keep backing that up, and it's just for, writing something up, and they are just, like, okay, it's at some point they are going to forget that, but the internet never forgets, and at some point that meter is full, and they should not be able to be trusted anymore, and they should just let go. Agreed. In my opinion, because that's a never-ending circle of people backing each other up no matter what they do to mess up.
Yeah, and I find it equally as interesting that people like Laura Kate Dale, Zoe Quinn, Anita Sarkeesian, any sort of person, and we'll mention Jim Sterling because Jim Sterling used to do great work, and then he suddenly just changed like about a year and a half ago, and everything was just completely different. It was very unusual. But the thing is that they can make mistake after mistake after mistake and get away with it, yet we look back at the JonTron incident where he said literally one thing that wasn't even derogatory at all, and yet he got cancelled, and nobody wanted to talk to him. Obviously, we were looking. Sophia mentioned it earlier about I can't remember his name, but how he essentially made a comment that he got him pretty much run out of the games industry, which is insane. It's like, they haven't even made mistakes. They've just put an opinion out there. And in that case of Peace and Quiet, it wasn't even an opinion. It's a statement. That's it. And nothing more than that. And it's a joke. And he gets run out of the games industry completely. JonTron got run off of his channel for years, for a long time, until he came back with a vengeance. And it was... And to be fair, that appearance he did on the H3 podcast where he was trying to get baited into saying exactly what happened was so uncomfortable, and you could tell he'd gone through the ringers. Yet these people sort of like, and I don't want to use the term like this because I think a lot of people do say a lot of derogatory things about games journalists anyway, but they are sort of like leeches in a sense where they just won't let go of anything. When someone has done something wrong that's not on their side of the political spectrum or their opinion, they get cancelled, and they will never, ever let them get anywhere within their respective career.
And it's so obvious. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Sophia.
Go ahead, yeah.
And it's so obvious what they're doing when they weaponize these jokes, because again, they all made edgy jokes themselves. They know people make edgy jokes. They know these edgy jokes aren't offensive or malicious. They're just people making dark humor. But
absolutely.
But what they'll do is, because they'll find something they can weaponize, and so then they'll destroy someone. So like, they knew Colin's joke wasn't hating all women. They know he likes women. He was happily in a relationship at that time, but it was just something they could find to just force somebody out of the industry while they go about ignoring their own pasts of edgy jokes. And I mean, we're seeing this moral panic with such edgy jokes now, as you see like Netflix and all these stuff start to pull off episodes in this moral panic when at the time none of this mattered. So we're just seeing this like this insane, I call them jacktivists, journalist activists, where just jacktivism is going out of control to just it's all about their ideology when they know. And that's what the issue. If someone was consistent in finding something offensive, I will respect that view. I don't respect them when they're so all over the place on what they're going to take offense with. It shows that it's not about what they actually believe. This isn't their values. This is their activism.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. I would even say that Pete and I actually kind of talked about this. It's almost a contest for clout. Who can be offended, who can win the offended Olympics and get the most clout or internet points. And I think that that's a disservice to us as fans. I'm going to speak from a fan's point of view rather than a journalist's point of view in this specific instance, because I enjoy gaming entertainment. Part of the gaming lifestyle is edgy jokes. I mean, I grew up in a time of TeamSpeak, where
I think we all did.
Yes. Where if you couldn't take being called some difficult slurs, well, you probably muted your microphone or took your headset off, because you weren't going to be able to play, and not hear these things. And then on top of it, another group that I enjoy. I have to admit, I have to be very honest and say I enjoy them less at this point. But Aaron Hansen from Ego Raptor from Game Grumps.
Oh yeah,
he's well known. It's very much documented. His use of the N-word. I do think that he got out ahead of it during the BLM protest, and he just said, "Look, I did it. I was wrong. I shouldn't have done it. I've learned." I kind of like that approach if I had to compare, whereas like Danny O'Dwyer or any others are like, I never said it. I know, and swept it under the rug. I never. Yeah, that's so long ago.
Which is so stupid, considering that there's video evidence proving that he clearly did do it. At least Ego Raptor put his hands up and said, "Yeah, okay, it was problematic, and I did it. Like, sorry, that's it."
Yeah,
I think one of the frustrating things too about how we're treating jokes and the games media is that they ignore context. So
yes,
absolutely.
I'm gay and trans. My partner is gay and trans like me, and we'll jokingly call each other a gay slur and just laugh about it. And in our context between us, that is offensive. But if someone was to just hear that, they would get offended. But no one wants to question the context. Another example is, and I'll get quite serious here for a second, is about a decade ago, I was very violently raped, and I had really bad PTSD from it. How I got over some of my trauma was we started kind of joking about it, not joking about what happened, but one of the symptoms of my PTSD is I was very uncomfortable when men I didn't know entered my home. And if anyone knows what PTSD is, like, you can't control that. It's just something that you just get PTSD. It just really, you just have these triggers.
Yeah.
And so my partner, we would start to joke about my PTSD triggers. One of them was like, if I was talking a lot or if she was getting like annoyed by me, she'd be like, "Leave me alone, I'm going to call the maintenance man." The joke being, when we had to put in maintenance orders at our apartment, I hide when they come in. I would stay in the bedroom and let them do the work, and I would not come across them. And my partner took that symptom and we made it a joke. A handful of years later, I don't get bothered as much by my traumatic past. I don't have as many triggers anymore. I have learned to cope and get over it. And that is through using humor and dark humor.
Yes.
But in the context, if someone was just looking in and didn't know the dynamic between me and my partner, how we joke, how those jokes helped me in the end cope with a really bad thing, they would be like, "Oh, her partner's making fun of rape. Cancel her." And but no one wants to take in that context. So like even if someone is using a slur in a game, sometimes obviously you get, quote unquote, heated gamer moments where it's just people angry and lashing out.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just people saying edgy, bad things to their friends because in between them, that's funny. And those words aren't always malicious, but people just, no one wants to care about context. Word bad, emotion bad, everything bad. You can't. No one wants to explore the nuance and to see like what the underlying reason for said joke is, and so they just get offended, and that's like the biggest problem right now. And we're to go back to what I alluded to earlier, we're seeing that with the moral panic over jokes as episodes get pulled of TV shows that some of those actually had anti-racism messages. It was using humor to make points, but blackface bad, pull it, like ignoring all context.
Yeah, the biggest one for me was the 40 Towers episode, where obviously it was the typical English person who obviously believed that, you know, Germany was bad and all of that sort of thing. It was literally satirical about all of that sort of thing, and that's what made it funny. It was the context of that joke. You know,
it's true.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you've got an English person and a German person here, and we both. Yeah. Am I wrong in thinking it? Do you find it funny as well, Jen?
Yeah, I've heard both of you.
There you go. So
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
if we can laugh about it, I'm sure the rest of the world could laugh about it. You know, but they're not willing to look at the context of everything in that respect. It's just, I think it's wrong. And like you said, dark jokes can help with very traumatic experiences. You know. I think someone who has mentioned it on podcasts before has obviously said, and most edgy comedians will say that anything is on the table for joking about.
Yes.
Like, nobody should be excluded from a joke. You know, everyone should be included in the joke, and that means whether it's offensive or not doesn't matter. It means that everyone can be joked about, and everyone can be. You know, everyone could be the butt of the joke, but it's not done. It may not be done in a malicious way at all. It's just a way to sort of cope with things that are negative. You know, people make Holocaust jokes because of it. You know, and obviously, I don't mean to bring that up to a German on our ranks, but you know, it is a very, very dark time in human history, not just their history, and it's just. I think it takes the sting off of the absolutely disgusting event that it was.
Jokes take the power away from bad things. So and so like I took the power away from a traumatic event that was really hurting my life for a while. I was in a bad mental place for a while. I started joking. I took the power away.
Yes.
The problem is when we get offended by just a word or just a joke or all this, we give it more power, and so people become more and more victimized. They become more and more offended. And now that word has so much power to ruin someone's day. But the way my partner and I joke with transphobic or gay slurs, if someone calls me that, I don't care anymore. Like, I'll be like, yeah, you kind of suck. You're using that word, but it's not going to ruin my entire day. I've taken the power away from something that was meant to hurt me. And that's where humor is always the best. So when you have this dark humor, like, jokes about 9/11. That was a traumatic day for not just America, but huge parts of the world.
Yeah.
We start to take the power away from that. We start to belittle the people that did it. And there is a lot of healing power in that, but no one wants to appreciate that anymore. Everyone just wants to be upset. And when everyone's upset, it's not shocking why we're seeing depression rates, anxiety, all this stuff on the rise, because we're constantly told, be offended by this at all times.
Right. And in fact, that actually kind of leads me to another point, which is secondary offense. I've noticed a lot of things, and in Pete's example, and Pete, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. A lot of what we're seeing in journalism, specifically games journalism, is secondary offense. I'll use I've forgotten the game that was debuted at the PS5 thing.
What was that one?
Little Devil Inside.
That's
Little Devil, that's it. That was pulled immediately because someone felt that the dreadlocks were offensive, and perhaps they were. I'm not here to say whether they're offensive or not, but I believe that the people that were voicing their offense were voicing it on behalf of other minorities, we'll say. So at what point is it true offense or secondary offense? You know, which is the, you know, what takes precedence?
I honestly don't think that any journalist should speak up for another, you know, minority or whoever to be offended on their part. If that particular ethnicity, gender group, whatever, is offended by that, then they can make their voices heard. Why does it take a journalist to come out and say, we are offended for you, we are, we want to stop this? It's in a sense, it's creating a moral panic within the vast majority of the readership, and even those groups who go, I'm not offended by this. Why are you talking? Why are you taking away my voice? And if they do voice that opinion to some of these journalists and say, I'm not actually offended by it, because we look at the most recent incident, and this is obviously away from the games industry, of this whole idea that white voice actors can't voice black characters anymore. And a lot of the comments that I saw about Mike Henry obviously stepping down from playing Cleveland was that I'm a black guy, and to obviously quote that some of them were saying I'm black, and I've really appreciated your role. Voice work has no skin color or gender or whatever. It's just it's a role, and you're an actor and you're playing that role. So he essentially went on the offensive pretty much, and went that he was walking away from a role that has made it a very lucrative career for him, just to gain some internet good boy points with a screaming, very vocal minority. And it's and we shouldn't go down this route at all. It's eventually going to lead to even these journalists getting cancelled at some point. So where does it stop is my problem.
What's really upsetting too is that a lot of this secondary offense, it ends up backfiring in the faces of the communities they're trying to supposedly protect.
Yeah.
So when you have all these massive streaming giants pulling movies, pulling episodes, or comedians, voice actors stepping away from roles, people are going to mock those voice actors. But then as people start losing things they like or want to watch, they're going to steer that anger towards the black community and be like, what is this? Look what you did. Or and I hate to have to bring up me being trans again, but as a trans person, when the media is always crying offense over things that aren't offensive, that backfires on people like me, where people just think a lot of trans people are screeching babies that get offended over everything. And so they start to look down on people like me. And so there is just a lot of harm to these communities, because it's, the people doing it, they'll get dragged, they'll get mocked. But the actual anger, the resentment will build up towards black people, trans people, gay people, whatever is like in at that moment.
Right. Well, Jen, I was actually going to point a question at you.
Yeah, okay.
But so I would like to get your thoughts and feels on, basically, I'm actually kind of mirroring exactly what Sophia has just said. Stuff like, voice acting. Voice acting is very, very important in games journalism, as well as, or in games, sorry, as well, of course, just entertainment in general, animated pictures and stuff like that. Do you think that, speaking of blowback, actually, we are supposed to not be able to tell a person's race or anything by voice? If someone is saying a white guy is voicing, let's say, an African American, isn't that inherently racist in itself by saying his voice is identifiable as, an African American, or as a white person, or as a person of color?
I think so, because there are great impersonators out there. They can recreate every accent there is existing in a language or over the world. And I think if that person is doing a good job, why not? It's not just, black people have to voice black people, and white people have to voice white people, and Asians have to be Asians, because stuff like that is just keeping everyone in their little kind of groups and not mixing them together. I have an accent. You can probably tell that
not at all.
You can probably tell that I'm not a native English speaker with some quirks that I have.
Right.
But that's totally fine. I try to keep it as much as possible away
you're
from me.
You are wonderful. Your command of the English language is quite good. So no worries there.
And it would make me disappointed if they're just like, yeah, but you are not a native English speaker. I'm sorry, you can't voice over this kind of character. You can only voice over the character that has the thick, very thick accent and something like that. And it's just, yeah, you are German, you have to voice the German guy or the German gal in English or whatever. That's just something that would make me a bit sad. And also going back on the topic that some journalists try to speak out for minorities, it makes me sad because I want them fight alongside as a part of the movement and not setting themselves apart by, hey, I made it clear for you, I'm your voice. Please have me some good internet points and please accept me
Yes.
as part of you.
Yeah.
And that's just something that's completely the opposite and clearly shows that they're not for the thing that they are fighting for, but just to hire their own recognition, their own status, whatever you want to will. Me, for example, I'm going to the Christopher Street Day for years here in Germany and being part of the community because I just love it. I just want to see them being heard. I want to be part of that movement, but I'm not posting that everywhere. Look at me, and making some sort of selfie and just slapping it in everyone's faces as much as I can because I want to actively be a part of that movement and help people to understand what it is about without pushing myself in the front row. And that's something that makes me really disappointed in some people, actually.
Yeah.
If I can add on top of some of that.
Absolutely.
One thing I'm curious about is where does it end? So white actors can't voice black characters anymore.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, Scarlett Johansson got canceled. The film role ended because she was going to play a trans man.
Yeah, that was in Ghost in the Shell,
no,
wasn't it?
not...
Oh, no, that wasn't the film.
No,
that was but she also had that issue with Ghost in the Shell because she was playing an Asian actor, character.
Yeah.
She had the trans man role canceled because people were like, oh, you're not a trans man. You had the Glee actor who played an American Crime Story, the person who killed Versace. And he was like, oh, I'm taking roles away from gay people. I'm no longer going to play gay characters. So now we're building this thing where only white people can play white people. Only gay people can play gay people. Only trans people can play trans people. So where does that end? Where does acting begin now? What roles can actors take? And it's just creating that we're really stifling creative freedom. Like some straight actors can play a really good gay character. Like you shouldn't have to be gay in real life to be able to act it. Yeah. Or likewise, does that mean are we going to start being like, oh, you're gay, you can't play a straight character anymore? Yeah. Like it goes both ways and it's problematic in that sense.
I agree.
Yeah, and I want to bring up a good point that Sophia mentioned there, obviously, about, straight men playing gay roles. Just look at the film I Love You, Philip Morris, where Jim Carrey and Ewan McGregor, both straight men, playing amazing gay people. And it's a really, really convincing performance by both of them. It's just, how do you sort of subsect each other like that? Like, how, we essentially are definitely going to be going down the route of, we're going to segregate again. We're starting to go back towards the 1950s where we're going to get segregation. Like, only trans people are allowed to sit at the front left of the bus, or, black people can sit wherever they want and white people have to be relegated to the back or something. I don't know. It's just, this whole situation is becoming far too much, to be honest, for me. It's ridiculous.
Complicated.
I would say that segregation today would be akin to the phrase, quote, stay in your lane. which
Yeah.
gets bandied about quite a bit. And it is really becoming that. It's becoming, and it is stifling creativity, because it's like, if I go to write a game or anything, but let's say I was a writer on a game, I am a cis white female, masculine female, cis white masculine female, straight. There's no characters like that except one, which is Brienne of Tarth. Now, if I'm going to settle down and write something, do I get to only write from my point of view? Do I not get to explore these other, points of view, these other beautiful cultures, these other ways of thinking, and these just, the world is so full of beautiful people. But I'm being told to stay in my lane. And not, what is the word? It's not acquire culture. What is it? When you're, like, if you're appropriate, that's it, cultural appropriation type thing, and it's like, but by not allowing people to explore other cultures and other points of view and other thoughts and experiences, we are, just as Pete said, we are segregating again. And I think that's really coming across in games, which we will mention here in a bit, more specifically The Last of Us Part 2, in my opinion. Again, we will get into it a bit. But also, what I wanted to ask Sophia was, do you feel that a lot of these articles that are coming out by games journalists that are kind of secondary offensive, are taking secondary offense? Do you think they are doing this for altruistic reasons, or is it to get clicks?
I think it's mostly to get clicks. Those controversial articles bring in a lot of views. I think part of it is this way of, they're kind of trapped on the side. It's like, look how woke, look how progressive, look how amazing I am. I'm your ally. Look at me. I'm defending you. But I think deep down it's, hey, we're gonna allow these people to say something ridiculous. It's gonna bring in hate. And I don't even know if they realize it. I think it's the people. I think they've kind of become, some of them have become useful tools where they've been brought on because, hey, that hate, that anger, it gets into the culture war, it brings in hate. And so like the writers, I think, are writing what they want to write. I don't think deep down they're like, oh, I'm going to say the police, like Waypoint, Daniel Riendow at Waypoint, now known as Vice Games, wrote in her Resident Evil 2 review how the police station is offensive because it's not a place of safety to a lot of black people.
Oh gosh. Oh,
and I think she is someone who believes that, but I think she gets a job because those are her beliefs and because the industry has become really nepotistic. I think it's just become this, excuse the term here, but a circle jerk of these people just like vigorously trying to like show how much like that they are. And so I think they believe a lot of what they say, but they also know that, and I'm kind of jumping around here, I'm trying to formulate my thoughts, I apologize.
That's okay. No.
But that hate does bring in clicks, which in my my article about the click, he mentioned that, my source, that a lot of it is about that those articles get shared around. They do bring in a lot of views because people like me, and I've tried to step back after I had that interview. I tried to step back from some of that, where I stopped highlighting bad articles as much as I was. I occasionally still do, but not as much as I once was, because it's, I'm helping these sites. My anger, you can share the archive around, but most people are going to Google it and they're going to go, and every person is bringing another click to them. And so an article that maybe would just languish around 10,000 views, the rage when it gets shared all over Reddit, gets shared all over Twitter, gets YouTubers discussing it in mass, the reactionaries, that maybe 10,000 views can jump up to 100,000 or more. And they very much know that.
Okay.
So I think...
go on.
I was kind of... I don't mean to be so scrambled in that description, because I think it's a lot of things. I'm trying to narrow it down, but... I think they believe it. I think they also know that it brings in clicks, and I guess if that makes sense, I'm sorry.
No, it makes perfect sense. Absolutely.
It did to me, but also you raised a good point. You talked about the YouTube reactionaries, obviously to not name drop too many people, but obviously the Quartering, Review Tech USA, people like that. Do you feel that games journalists are threatened by the YouTube commentary community because they do a better job of actually verifying with sources, checking the sites, everything like that, they try to get the better take on everything rather than just a one-sided opinion?
I don't think they're I think they're threatened by how well they succeed. I think there's a lot of problems with a lot of the reactionary side does get stuff wrong. A lot of these people,
Yeah.
when you're making 4 or 5 videos a day, they get a lot wrong. They're not as thorough as they could be. So I don't think the journalists are threatened by the fact that these people are more factual, because a lot of times if you actually do a lot of digging, they're more driven by their emotions, just as the journalists are.
Okay.
So I think the threat actually comes from the fact that people with no college education, none of this stuff. I mean, my career is blowing up. I never went to a journalism school. And so I think they're threatened by the fact that like these people spent $100,000+ getting these educations, that they're getting, some of them are getting really good paying jobs. Like people like Patrick Klepek recently revealed that he gets $100,000 a year, but people on YouTube can make way more than that with advertisers. They get views. Like, so these people can write an article that's maybe getting 50,000 or less views, but a YouTuber can make a 10-minute reactionary clip and get hundreds of thousands of views. So I think that's where they're threatened, is that the visual medium, the YouTube culture has really taken a lot away from the written form.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree as well. I just wanted to obviously gauge that point, which is why I brought it up.
Pete, did you have any more examples before we get Jen's examples?
So there was a couple of obviously incidents that have happened over the time of the last, even within the last couple of months, where a particular article that was raised on VG 24/7 by someone named Emily Guerra caused a lot of incident with the fact that they misreported about why Shirley Curry, aka Skyrim Grandma, was taking time off of YouTube, even though she didn't end up taking that much time off in the end. They were obviously blaming on toxic culture, commenters, people on YouTube being offensive towards her and telling her how to play the game, all that sort of thing. But actually, oddly enough, didn't include her response in that video, in that article, which was saying, no, I'm doing this for health reasons, which... if they were to check their sources, they would have obviously known that they've made a big mistake writing that article, but yet it was quite easy for them to write a rage bait, article, op-ed again, because it gets clicks, and it's exactly what Sophia previously mentioned before. It just gets clicks. So when does this sort of thing have to stop now?
Yeah, I have to add just my absolute shock at the fact that they released this article on Twitter. The Skyrim grandma herself replied and said, "This is not correct." And they did not take the article down. They just did a kind of footnote.
Yeah, it's an update at the bottom of the page that just says Curry has sent the below tweet, and they've adjusted our headline to remove the word onslaught. Yeah,
even the headline was not factual, even after they readjusted it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Absolutely.
Some journalists even accused her of starting a dogpiling against them. Like, they made the grandma the villain.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We support Shirley very much on this podcast, so it's just I cannot even.
She's the cutest, and she is so wholesome. And I also commented on that original tweet, and I was just like, "Where is your proof?" I see her stating that she did step back or want to step back because of health reasons. Hello, VG 24/7. Why do you do that kind of thing? And most people there commenting were, "Oh my god, the internet is so bad. I hate the people. Don't do this to our grandma," and stuff like that, just repeating itself. And a few actually came across that tweet that Shirley made, where like excuse me, but she does that for health reasons. Why do you do that kind of thing? And if you are wrong, a footnote is not going to cover it. And that's something as I would say, and I don't have anything as a degree as a journalist or something, but my common sense tells me that if you are not after the clicks and actually have some sort of journalistic pride in your heart or in your every fiber of your body, you would not do just a footnote, you would make a statement. And I would have required them to do that, but they didn't, because that is not that good, actually.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, embarrassingly enough, I think I might be the only one with journalism education. But having said that, I will give a brief example of what journalism now means to me. Mm-hmm. I started in newspaper while I was in college, or university as they call it over here. Two things happened at that time that really made me kind of question what is true journalism. Now, this is over in the U.S. I can't speak globally, and I can only speak from my point of view. One thing I noticed was that we could not sell papers if there weren't advertisers. Advertisers had over, 2/3 of the page. 1/3 was written text, and then 2/3 was advertisers. So we had to cater a lot of our subject matter to the advertisers to not upset them. And then another incident happened. I was writing for a paper in a very small rural town in Texas. It was a very evangelical ruled town. The biggest church, which is huge in a kind of East Texas sense, the biggest church had a controversy because the music minister was found to be a pedophile. We then were asked to bury the story. The biggest story in the entire tiny town of 10,000 people, and it was not on our front page. That experience I've seen occur in games journalism as well. I say we because we are kind of all seen as a kind of games journalist kind of collective, for better or for worse. Yeah. But I have seen a lot of journalism being catered to, and Kotaku would be my number one thing to call out on this, is they cater to advertisers. But that also means that reviews are catered to advertisers. And Jen, I think it's you that has, correct me if I'm wrong, you have the examples of like reviews and being biased and.
Well, yeah, yes and no. I was, of course, since I'm also reviewing games, I tend to look up some reviews for games that I'm interested in and not really sure if I should buy them or not. So beforehand, I get in a few of opinions. And sometimes I have the quirk to search for other reviewers' opinion on a game that I recently played, not for a review, but also for my kind of backlog or personal preferences. And the thing that I came across on Kotaku is that they are swearing a lot in the article itself, which, I mean, it doesn't matter that one that I was picking up the two that it said with me not quite right. They had the word for, for not P but the other thing.
Okay.
Yes.
Within the first paragraph, and it was not a kid's game. It was a visual novel, one of them, and with some serious topic tackled in that. So definitely not the kids' audience, but still, I don't want to read that in my review, and I keep away from that. Imagine me throwing the F-bomb in a Pokemon review or anything like that. It just is not good for the outlet and also not for me. And if you have to take this kind of eloquent ways to get views or around in your review, ouch. But still, the one that I want to highlight is Jason Schreier's Kotaku review on Octopath Traveler. Because, and there's the other thing that I unfortunately see often around in reviews, is that the personal opinion of the game overshadows the neutral reporting thing on a game, which can be okay, but please don't overdo it. Because when I'm going to write a review, I want to report on my experience, but not if I don't like, for example, I don't like main protagonists that have blonde hair. I don't keep rambling about that. I mean,
Right.
I really don't care, but it doesn't affect the choice here. But what Jason actually did, and that's also a thing that I see quite often, he claims to have finished the review, and I don't think he did. Or he clicked through the stories.
Okay.
I definitely got the impression on the Octopath Traveler game that he did not complete the game.
Even though
So-
he said he did.
Even though he said he did. So, I mean, that kind of begs the question, how important is it to complete a game in order to review it? Truthfully review it.
My personal opinion, I'm not sure if you are all familiar with that kind of review, but from Octopath Traveler, but as a reviewer myself, I know it's hard to keep that game. You know, you play the whole game, especially with JRPGs or RPGs in general, that are really, really intense to review. So I don't. Yeah, of course, it would be cool if you could 100% a review, but we know that it's not going to
Right.
happen.
No, not in the short time frames that we're given.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Especially these smaller outlets that, that don't get the whole review code weeks prior to the release date. So, Jason claimed that he had 38 hours for the main story and did some optional dungeons according to his review. I personally have been playing Octopath Traveler, and I am going to do 100%. I haven't been finished. I haven't tackled the last game's end boss, but I do know with 140 hours into it that this is not possible.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
He claimed that he did all 8 stories and some optional dungeons, but also keeps rambling on that that game is kind of grindy, which I understand, but it's only grinding until you have 4 people in your party, which means that the required level in some sort of areas are still there, but they are not progressing as steep as they did before. And just to add, the main story lasts, according to howlongtobeat.com, on an average 60 hours and 45 hours if you are rushed. And I can kind of confirm that. I'd say it would be 60-ish hours if you are taking your time and doing all the main stories, but also not grind too much. I'm grinding quite a lot. I get that. But what Schreier is also going to do in his review is that he picks on the wrong points, in my opinion, and things that kept sour with him, and also saying that the 8 stories aren't as rememberable. They are, yeah, they don't get you emotionally invested in them, but I dare to say that he just skipped the whole cutscenes and just rushed through the game to have, yeah, to have completed it for the initial release date. And yeah, it makes.
I was just going to say that opens the question up. And actually, I'll throw this one at Sophia, but I would like to hear everyone. If someone like Jason Schreier can, let's just be honest here, obviously lie on a review like Octopath Traveler, would he not then be subjected to lying on other things?
Well, I'll be careful because I don't think he necessarily had to have lied on the review. I mean, those may have been his opinions, and even on things like length. I assume that game has difficulty settings. A lot of critics, when reviewing games, they do rush them, so it's very possible it was played on easy, and it was rushed through. He could have still taken on all the cutscenes. It could have just been a very rushed experience, which, from what I know of a lot of reviewers, that tends to be the case.
It is, yes.
And so I'm not going to go on like an allegation that he lied, he didn't lie. So I'm going to avoid that route because that can open up its own can of worms. But I do know a lot of people, when they review, they don't do everything. They don't fully take in the experience. A lot of times they don't even beat the games. That is common for games not to be finished before they review. That's why when I review, one thing I tried to do is I tried to platinum most games I review. I don't platinum all of them, but I platinum about 85% of every game I review.
Wow.
I will get the platinum trophy, and I will play usually on the hardest difficulty. I will do all the quests. I will do all the collectibles. And I feel like when you fully take in the game, that's when I can give like the most honest opinion, and I can let people know. Like, it's my way of showing people, hey, I do everything. You know it. I can show proof. I don't think you need to 100% a game to fully take it in, but I do think you should finish them because like there's a lot of games. So I'm going to go to The Last of Us real quick. I really, really liked the first 12 hours of The Last of Us 2. Okay. I was very public about this on Twitter, saying, hey, these first 12 hours, I'm really enjoying. Like, it was fast becoming one of my favorite games of the generation. I really enjoyed it. I was surprised because I thought it would be trash. But then I got to the last half, which I won't spoil for your audience or anything, but there was a drastic change about halfway through. And by the end of the game, I hated it. The last half of the game was so miserable for me because of something that happens. Yeah. But had I just written a review on, hey, these first 10 hours, I can tell this game's amazing, 10 out of 10. But if I hadn't taken in the ending or the last half, that changes the whole opinion. So a game that was like easily becoming about a 9 for me is probably like a 6, if not less.
Right.
And so finishing experiences is immensely important.
Yeah.
I mean, I 100% agree with that. Like, if you're not even gonna, I would think that in my respects of reviewing a game, I think you should at least complete the main story and potentially some side stuff if there is side stuff in there. I mean, it is very difficult to actually review a game that actually has no ending, and I've obviously had to experience that with things like Terraria and that, where those games are just completely ongoing and you'll never come to the end of them. It's just, it's very, very odd, like, that I find that a lot of reviews do tend to be rushed, and this isn't just big outlets, this is smaller outlets as well. Sometimes you can get a code like in a couple of days before release or on the day of release, and that outlet wants a review out within a couple of days. I mean, I won't go into the details of it, but we had a game recently that came in on the Friday and a review was pushed out by the Saturday, and it's hard for that particular writer to actually go and do that. It's very difficult. You know, you have to essentially sit in your house for 24 hours, lock yourself under house arrest just to get this game done so that you can write about it, just because this company may not have been forthcoming in sending these codes out as promptly as you'd want to. You know, and that's just for the smaller outlets. The bigger outlets are getting codes like weeks in advance, and yet they're still pushing out these reviews that feel like they have rushed the games. And I'm with Sophia here that I don't particularly want to get into this can of worms really of accusing someone that their review may or may not be rushed, but that's just the impression I get from this particular review itself. And I if I'm honest, I trust Jennifer's opinion more so because she has played the game for a longer period of time, that actually when she looks at something like this and goes, this doesn't sit right with me because of 36 hours, like, although I'm grinding the game more than he was, you shouldn't even be anywhere close to the ending at that point, unless you, like Sophia said, you're playing it on an easy difficulty, skipping through some story aspects, in which I don't know why you would skip through story aspects if you're writing a review on the game.
So here's something interesting that I once experienced firsthand was when I was at Niche Gamer, I was reviewing a lot more than I review now, and one of the games I played was Darksiders 3.
Oh gosh, I remember that one too.
Yeah, and there was, I believe it was the critic at Eurogamer wrote about how the horse in the game just disappears without being explained. But in a cutscene, something happens to the horse very early on that explicitly shows why the horse is not in the rest of the game. And they just were like, the game doesn't explain it. Meanwhile, it discusses other things like, oh, this isn't explained in the game. But meanwhile, towards the last half of the game, there's all these stop and walk moments where like you have to just walk. I mean, walk and talk moments where you just have to walk and listen to somebody talk.
Yes,
and all this stuff is explained, and here the critic is like, oh, the game doesn't tell you what happened. I had no idea why my horse just disappeared. And it's like, that's a core part of that beginning of the game. You clearly didn't continue or watch the cutscenes. You were skipping stuff.
Yeah.
Or there was an IGN review a few years ago where the reviewer wrote about how the game just suddenly ends, and the designer said, well, then you played it on easy. If you that we locked the true ending of the game off if you only play on easy. And the journalist was like, no, I played it on normal. I know I played it on normal. And the game devs got in a fight, was like, no, if you had played on normal, you would have gotten the secret ending. You have to beat the final level on normal to get this extra level. And it kind of exposed the critic as playing on easy and lying about what had happened.
Yeah. A similar incident actually happened with a game called Nier Automata, because there was a lot of different endings to that game where, as critics, I think they must have only played the game once, because it was only after the fact that when the game came out that people realised that there were multiple endings that fully completed the story. So it's just I do sympathise with game reviewers in certain respects, in the fact that they're getting a lot of this stuff pre-release, and not only this stuff is known to them, they have to discover it by themselves. And fair enough, I completely understand that, but that's the point is that as a games reviewer, you should be the one that's putting something out there saying, oh, we completed this game 100%, and there is stuff that you're going to want to see, without giving spoilers. There is a lot of stuff that you can do post-game that is going to change the whole dynamic of this story, and it will be interesting to sort of see that sort of happen, but it just feels like games reviewers only tend to play a game once and then drop it.
Yes.
Another problem, too, is a lot of them just don't seem to have a passion for the hobby of playing games to review.
Yes.
I love turning on a game and playing through it for review. Like, even games I don't like, there's something I just enjoy about, hey, this is cool, I get to play games and make money for it. But so many journalists have so much resentment towards their audience, with all the gamers, they use the term gamers as a derogatory...
Oh, well, like toxic gamers.
Yeah, but they just, not even just that, but they'll just use gamers, the word gamers, and it'd be like, as a derogatory word, kind of slipping up here. And when they're talking about games, like, they just seem to resent the fact that they have to play a game for review. I think it was not too long ago that Patrick Klepek of Vice Games was complaining about how, like, they don't get paid overtime to review games, like, all the time they have to dump in a game. And I'm just like, you get to play games in your free time at home. Last year, I reviewed Red Dead Redemption 2, or 2 years ago, I think. Excuse me.
2 years ago, yes.
That's a hot button issue on this podcast. Let's just say that.
And I didn't get a review code for obvious reasons. I'm blacklisted from the industry. And so I got it on launch day. I got it on the Thursday night before it came out at its midnight release. And I dumped about 110 hours into that game within 5 days, nonstop binging it just to get a review out as quick as I could. from start of the game, made it through the epilogue, did much of the side activities, 100 hours in 5 days. Meanwhile, there were critics on podcasts talking about how like they reviewed it, but openly admitting that they didn't finish the game and they had it for like a month early. And it's like, how do you get this game early and not finish it? It's your job. And I'll always go back to, there's a lot of games that for the first half or so I'll love, but then when you get into that last half, when it starts to be redundant or overly long, like the very last half of Red Dead in some ways became a chore for me. It became too long. There's that island sequence that I thought was miserable.
Yes.
And there were some critics saying, oh, I only played it about 30 or 40 hours. I only played it up through chapter or act 3.
Gosh.
But it's act 4 or 5 when it really starts to become like something else for a bit. And they missed that key sequence while admitting that, hey, we didn't review the full game. But yet, here's a 10 out of 10 for it, even though we didn't finish. And it becomes so... It becomes a big problem for me. And then, again, you get these enthusiasts. There's a lot of people that want to review games that will do it critically, will do it well, and that will have the passion for it. Meanwhile, just so many critics are just like, oh, I have to do this. F gaming, I don't want to do this. Blah. And it's like, how do you not have a passion?
Well,
It's just another game.
Exactly. That kind of brings us to another point. And Jen, actually, I'd like to get your thoughts first, and then Sophia's, and then Pete's. Alanah Pearce.
Ugh.
So she recently released a video saying that, I quote, 7 or an 8 is an average score in gaming. Now, that is on a 1 to 10 scale. I want to clarify that for the audience. So, yeah, Jen, give me your thoughts on 7 or 8 being average for a game.
Yeah, there's a lot on my mind right now. I'm still on the Jason Schreier kind of review.
Oh, yes, well.
Yeah, I just want to quickly insert that before I answer that 7 and 8 kind of nonsense. I just want to point out that I don't want to actually say that he does not a good job, because obviously he can if you want to.
Oh, yes.
And I get that it's hard reviewing games, but I think writing for Kotaku, your story would have, or your review would have been successful, even though you would have taken a little more time for that. I'm not really sure if he had some pressure from Kotaku, but I also want to point out him rambling on way too much, why they actually join each other. A noble knight being respected by many, many people and having some sort of name around the country, joining forces with a filthy thief and stuff like that. Well, Jason, that's your average JRPG kind of story. And
It is, yeah.
The thing is also that hit me right and that I can't let go is that he wrote Hanit's name wrong in the review.
Oh, dear.
It's true. Yes.
And
I will say Kotaku doesn't seem to have editors, but yes.
Yeah, and the editor did not pick up on that, and also, I mean, maybe they aren't familiar with it. It is a strange kind of name, but yeah. But he kept, for me, pressing on some things and also said there's no overlapping story. There is, but it's hidden like a lot of things in that kind of game. But well, that's the thing that he is, and that's the thing that makes me kind of sad, because people, and as Sophia said, kind of don't see what they can make an opportunity of that, because reviewing a good game is good, but you are also giving some sort of information, and you could use that, even though if you didn't quite enjoyed that game, to do some sort of research or something to point out a little bit about the developer, something like that, and not make it overly negative, even though if you didn't enjoy it as much as others might.
Sure.
But an easy way out, and to segue into the thing that Kylie just mentioned, is giving a lot of games a mild kind of thing, and even state that 7 and 8 is an average game. I personally say no, because we have a scale from 1 to 10. We should use all that kind of the numbers that are incorporated in that kind of frame, because there is a 5 for a reason, and 5 is something for me that's average, that is okay, but still has flaws, has room for improvement, be it on the music, be it on the controls, be it on the performance, or anything else, or story-wise, if you will. Everything below that tends to be even more broken, and that's fine too. You don't know if this is an indie developer, they're still learning, or they have a difficult platform, something to deal with, or anything. But generally saying that 7 and 8 is an average game, a good score for that kind of range is something that is, narrowing the really good games and the average games down. It's hard to make a clear point about what is actually really, really good, that kind of blew your mind. And it's just okay and a nice experience, but would never pick up again.
Well, Jen, have you ever given a 10 out of 10, whether that be like, depending on the scale, 5 out of 5 or whatever, to a game?
Maybe if I was a baby writer, maybe. I can't actually remember. Honestly, I have to go back, but I drastically changed my mind on that, because a 10 out of 10, as easy as it is to give it to Breath of the Wild kind of titles, titles and stuff like that, is something that is nearly impossible for me, because 10 out of 10 would be perfection. Perfection. Everything is the top-notch kind of thing. Of course, unadmittedly, there are titles coming close to that. I won't disagree with that. And as much as perfection is a thing to strive for, it will never be reached, because games are made by humans, and humans always have flaws, which is totally fine. And that is nothing they can incorporate in a handmade game, which, again, is totally fine, because we all have our preferences and sort of image of perfection. But a 10 out of 10 game is...
It's a unicorn chaser, isn't it? The 10 out of 10, really.
Yeah.
I will admit, I did give a 5 out of 5 to Doom Eternal, but that was because I was excited. And I was doing the voiceover, and I just got excited.
Yeah, shall we say sleep deprived as well, after a 5-day slog through that one in particular?
That was a perfect example of, I had to rush through it, but I wanted to be sure that I, reviewed every aspect of it, for the audience and everything. But that was very intense pressure, because it was an embargo. But Pete, have you given a 10 out of 10? And what are your thoughts on a 7 out of 8, or 7 or 8 being average?
I've never given a game a 10 out of 10, a 5 out of 5, or 100%, because I've said it already. I feel that the 10 out of 10 is an actual unicorn chaser. Unfortunately, no game is perfect, no movie is perfect, no piece of fiction is perfect. There's always going to be flaws, and I think the highest that you should be able to go is a 9.5, but I'm not going to discourage anyone who turns around and says that a 10 out of 10 is a 10 out of 10, because I think what most people seem to forget is that a review is technically an opinion piece, and if someone resonates with that particular experience in that sort of way, then who are we to say otherwise? But I feel that with certain games, and I'm glad that Jen brought it up with Breath of the Wild and things like The Last of Us 2, where a lot of outlets were giving it 10 out of 10s, I personally wouldn't agree with that. I mean, Breath of the Wild, I can see its qualities. I can see what it done right for the Zelda universe. It's just, it didn't resonate with me like it did with everyone else. So I personally would have given it a 7 out of 10. But that, in that sort of respect, in Alanah Pearce's scale, that's an average game, and I don't agree. I don't
Right.
agree that that's an average game. I call that above average and anywhere from good to excellent. But because the review scale that I would go on is that a 0 to a 0.5 is a damn well unplayable game, and you can't ever play that, and you can't give it a good score. Whereas anything from like 1 to 2.5 is a bad game. But
Right.
so I've always been under the impression that a 5 is an average, middle of the road score because, let's be honest here, if you give a
It's the
game a 10
middle
out of 10, it is, it's the middle ground. It is literally the middle ground.
Yeah.
And also, like, if you give a game a 10 out of 10, that is literal perfection. And if you give a game 10 out of 10 that actually has quite a few problems, and you're not making that aware to people, like, where, you know, in Breath of the Wild, I encountered quite a few glitches early on, and I never saw any outlet actually describing any of the glitches that I saw. Maybe they were just isolated just to me or whatever, and it's an experience had by that particular person. So I think all this thing of slapping people down for what is essentially an opinion is exactly what we mentioned in the previous parts, was that people jump all over people for having an opinion. You know, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but this was the fact that she said that while she was at IGN, so therefore most people, most
We'll
people
get to that.
used to look up to IGN a lot more than they do now. So for them to have a review
Yeah.
scale of a 7 to 8 is an average game is actually putting that on the gamers themselves, that they're going to start to believe that. If they start to see that they put 7 average, 8 average game, it's like, okay, it is an average game, but then when you go and play it, you think it's a 9 or a 10 out of 10. It's so disparaging for a lot of people out there, especially review writers like ourselves, where we try to score everything fairly, and there is no bias in our opinions in that matter. It's just whether or not we like something.
Well, Sophia, same question to you. Have you ever given a, theoretical 10 out of 10? And what are your thoughts on Alanah Pearce saying that a 7 or an 8 is an average game?
So I'm going to take the 7 or 8 question in a somewhat different route, because I think I think 7 and 8 has become the average, because a 7 has very much, because a lot of people don't realize that a lot of game journalism is also PR. These people don't want to lose their connection. They don't want to lose their access. Access is very important, especially when whoever gets the news out first, or information out, they're going to get the most clicks.
Right.
And so they never want to burn access. So a 7 has very much become a way for game critics to give bad games a higher score than it deserves.
Oh, I see.
So 7, there are some games that are definitely like a 5 or a 4. Not that there are some games I like that I'll put at like a 5.5 or a 6 that I love, but they're not a 7 or an 8. But you see main critics will often give them that score because it's a way to soften the blow, because when it comes to meta, a lot of people won't spend $60 on a game if it gets a 70. If it gets a 7, we very much become conditioned by Metascore that if something is less than an 80, we're not going to spend full money on it. And so that 7 has been a way to manipulate the score so they can make the game look better than it is and not burn their publisher access. And that's not always the case, but that's just something I've noticed. A good example would be, look at the reviews of Just Cause 4. That was, in many ways, an objectively bad game.
Yes, yes.
But it got 7s and 7.5s. And you can find that with a lot of games, that a lot of main gamers who pick it up will be like, this is bad, but they get that 7. So that's why I think that 7 has become that average. As for the 10...
Sorry, I was going to raise a point, actually. Like, it's a really interesting thing that you brought up, in the fact that keeping with the sponsors and all that sort of thing, or keeping people happy with the connections, is that Rotten Tomatoes also does the same thing, that anything below a 60 is technically a rotten film, which is a very weird sort of scale and things, if I'm honest.
Yeah. If you're going strictly by numbers, yeah.
Well, there was... it wasn't leaked audio. I think it was from like a podcast or something, but some footage came out last year around the time of, or it might have been 2 years ago, around the time of one of the Star Wars films.
Yeah.
And 3 review critics, and I'm going to botch some of this because I don't remember who it was. You can find the clip. It's authentic. They were talking about how like they don't want to burn their access with Rotten Tomatoes and stuff, and so, or not with Rotten Tomatoes, excuse me, with Disney, and so they'll kind of boost up scores to keep that access because it's Disney who will take them to these film premieres that will take them to this stuff. Just a week ago, I was tweeting out pictures of a Twitter thread from people who work in games media that were blatantly talking about, hey, to avoid the hassle, do you ever bump up a review score? And it was game critics, game reviewers, some former, some current, talking about, oh yeah, this happens. And so they're admitting that they bump scores for various reasons. Mainstream critics are not the most trustworthy thing. And this has been a big point for me with, I think some of this can sometimes show how there's an ideological, they're all like along the same lines, and that there's very little diversity of thought, because even on its best day, The Last of Us 2, for example, is a very divisive game. There's going to be people who love the first one that aren't going to like this one for a lot of reasons. There's going to be people that love it for a lot of reasons. But at its best, it is divisive because of its how the last half is, some story stuff, some stuff in the beginning, some stuff at the end. It is divisive. But all the mainstream reviews are 10s out of 10s. Like, they are mostly 10s. Right. What's interesting, though, when you go to the critics that haven't scored it, if you go to the bottom page of the Metacritic page, the sites that don't offer review scores, they offered more harsh criticism of the game, talking about, hey, the gameplay didn't evolve, this stuff didn't evolve. And they wrote in a way that if they were to add a score, you can tell it wouldn't be a 10 out of 10. And conveniently, they're all the ones that don't score. And so it really does raise a lot of questions in that regard, because people don't want to burn that Sony access.
Yeah. Right. That was particularly Kotaku and Polygon, wasn't it?
And sorry, real quick, I didn't fully wrap up this thought, but with a game so divisive, review scores should reflect that divisiveness. And the fact that the scores don't show that divisive nature of this game, it really just shows how everything is so, it's become so homogenized in its way of thinking.
Yes.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd say we saw that with Death Stranding as well.
Oh, wow, yeah, did we?
Don't get me started on my Death Stranding rant. I platted that game, though. I suffered through and plat. Oh my god, 100% of it. I was going to review it, so I 100% of that game. And Hideo Kojima is my favorite game. Like, Metal Gear Solid is my all-time favorite video game series. I have, above my head right now, is all my like little Metal Gear statues. I even have the Death Stranding baby collectible.
Oh, nice.
And I got that game, was going to review it, 100%ed it, and suffered through the entire thing. I hated that fucking. I hated that effing game. Sorry.
That's all right.
Fine, absolutely. Oh gosh, yeah, we've made our position clear.
Well, I'm still interested enough to play it, but those
you and I are in agreement. Yes, Pete still wants to find out for himself.
Yeah, because I don't trust a lot of the reviewers. Like, there were some really good ones out there, but there were some really sort of questionable ones. I mean, I look at the YouTube commenters, especially like Skill Up. Skill Up's review was brilliant for it. But then I look at someone like Yong Ye, who is, like Sophia, a very big Hideo Kojima fan, so he was going to review that game pretty positively. So it's hard to sort of know where the loyalties lie and whether or not I'm sort of... I think the same with everything. I have to experience it for myself to know, to have an opinion on it. And I think that's a lot. I think that's where a lot of people and a lot of where the shouting and the screaming on internet forums does seem to be a problem, because you're getting people that are review bombing games 2 hours after a game comes out, and it's a 25-hour experience, and you can't have completed the game in that time, and that's just ludicrous, to be honest. But in the same respect, there are people out there who have seen, for example, The Last of Us 2, they have seen the leaks and they're not very happy about the direction and story, so they're making their opinion heard that I'm not buying this game, so I'm gonna knock it down in terms of the public score, basically, on Metacritic.
For what it's worth, even with my deep love of Hideo Kojima, I think I ended up giving Death Stranding like a 2.5.
Oh, wow.
It's one of the most... As I said, I actually really enjoyed the story and the characters. I thought it had phenomenal... I actually was really invested in that story. But the gameplay broke me. I've never been so bored at the tedium of an experience that I hated Death Stranding. So I was at least honest in my views. Like, I wasn't like, oh, I love Kojima, 10 out of 10. Please meet me, dude. No, that game's a 2.5. You made it dud. It's a piece of you know what.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can I ask you a question on it? Did you like
Yeah.
Metal Gear Solid 5 Phantom Pain?
No.
God.
I
Okay.
think
Do you
Metal
feel
Gear
that?
Solid 5 was a good game. It was not a good Metal Gear.
Yeah, I agree. Do you?
Yes,
Was it?
absolutely.
Was it a lot of
Yeah.
the facts that a lot of the mechanics that was in Phantom Pain did seem to come over to Death Stranding, even though obviously it was Kojima Productions doing it rather than Konami?
I guess I can see how some of the stuff came over, but Phantom Pain at least had much more stuff you could play with and do.
Yeah,
There's not a whole lot to Death Stranding. Like, there's not a lot at the end of the game. Like, you really don't make that much stuff, and like a lot of the weapons you end up can print off, they're kind of useless in a lot of ways.
Right.
yeah,
And it was just what really just hurt Death Stranding was it was so walking across the country was not
Yes.
fun. And I platinumed it, so I did.
yeah. That's
I
okay.
still can't believe that. That's amazing.
And like there was
Yeah.
just that tedium. I ended up just I'll avoid my Death Stranding rant, but
Fair
it
enough.
wasn't a big Hideo Kojima has really let me down with his last two games.
Ooh,
Fair.
yes,
That's totally fair.
I as a side note, and then Jen, I'm gonna ask you a question, but I do wish that he could have made a Silent Hill.
Yeah.
So
PG, we need that back.
I know exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, but just please don't have Konami to do with it in any way, shape, or form with their in-house developers, because they don't make games anymore. They make gambling.
Yeah.
Silent Hill survive.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I just look at Metal Gear Solid 3 that got HD textures and all that for a pachinko machine. That broke my heart.
Yeah, I remember
Rightfully so.
talking about that. But Jen, to kind of take it back to the reviews. So do you also think? What do you think? Do you think people change or soften the blows, so to speak? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think I stated it several times over at the Caffeinated Venturecast that I think they soften the blow, that they have some sort of homemade censorship to if they are too harsh, being afraid of losing a source, a business partner, someone who is sponsoring them or anything. So that's it's hard. I tend to see it from both angles. I can understand, but I also can. But I can, that's the thing that I'm always torn between, and it's hard to me to pinpoint something, or I don't want to say it. And by me struggling, even getting words out, you see how twisted and how hard it is to form some sort of opinion, because I can understand and I can see both sides, but I'm not happy with that, with how everything went down on a downward spiral, if you will. I mean, if you are afraid or have to be afraid to get a blow from which side ever, it's hard to form and to inform people and also make your own opinion transparent, and it's a hard kind of thing, and it breaks my heart on so many levels, because I wish I could be honest. I saw what honesty can do to me. I got in trouble for that quite some time with in arguments or something, not in the review kind of business, because I tend to be more neutral and inform people about my experience and trying to consider a lot of things, which is my targeted audience. Are people loving the genre, or do they want to test that kind of out? Are they used to another sort of level of quality when they are playing, for example, a jump and run or anything like that? Because there can be a lot going wrong or something. And yeah, I tend to bring my point across, my own feeling, opinion, and stuff. But I have to say, I tend to go the more neutral route as long as I'm in the review business, because yeah, it's hard, but also being honest with that, because I have what do you say? Maybe the freedom to do so because I'm not writing for a bigger outlet. And of course, there's a reputation to be there, and I'm not blatantly lying in my reviews. It's the total honesty. But my wordings are, even though I'm not going to say I do like a game, even though I don't like a game, but I report it a little bit in a more neutral way and giving more suggestions what could have been better instead of bashing it or soften it or leaving it out. That's something that people tend to forget, even if they forget to report on it, music or anything like that. You know,
how important for all of you? How important is music in a game, or in a game review? Should I say in a game review?
I'm biased there, so the others.
What about you? I kind of already know your feelings, but let's let the audience in. How important is music in a game review?
Who was that aimed at?
You, Pete. Sorry.
Okay. I mean, music is a massive importance to me generally in life anyway, so I feel that if a game review doesn't actually mention music, I do look down on it because it forms one aspect of this complete package, including sound effects, acting, voice, dialogue, everything like that. It forms this whole package of the game or the experience, and actually, the composition. It's like with a stage show or a Broadway musical. You're not just looking at the actors; you're looking at the songs, the performances, the lighting, the stage itself, the environments, everything. All of that forms one cohesive experience, and if a game reviewer doesn't particularly mention music, sound effects, stuff like that, I feel like they're not really paying attention to that, and actually it's doing the composers who work on these games a huge disservice, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair. Sophia, what do you think? Music, is it important in a gaming review?
I think music in a game is important, but I don't necessarily agree that it needs to be touched up on in every review. I know in a lot of my reviews, if the music particularly stands out, I will make mention of it, or if it's detrimental to the experience and doesn't mesh well, I will make mention of it. But there's quite a few reviews where I don't. Usually I'll maybe just throw it as a quick aside, just one quick line that, hey, the music is good, the music is bad, etc. But I never actually really focus on it too much, except in particular circumstances where it is like, if I wasn't yet reviewing games and I played Nier Automata, but if I was, like, I would have mentioned the music there because the orchestral stuff was so important to how it made me feel. Like, it was so important to the emotions it pulled out of me, so it would have been immensely important there. But if I'm playing like a generic shooter that the music just kind of exists, I'll just be like, I may just be like, yeah, the music exists. It doesn't really sway me one way or the other. So I think I guess it depends on how it makes me feel. And sometimes the music just makes me feel nothing. I'm just indifferent to it. And so I'll just maybe quickly convey that indifference, but I don't, I don't always make it like a primary focus, and maybe I should, but I usually, when I do my reviews, I'll focus on the things that are important and that like explain why I feel one way or the other about a game. But I don't really follow like a checklist of like, I need to touch this, I need to touch that, I need to touch that. The one thing I focus on the most is I'm very good at conveying what the gameplay of a game will be. And from messages I get a lot of people, that's where a lot of people appreciate my reviews, is because I'll go very in depth on like how something goes. And on my YouTube channel, I've kind of changed this a little bit because I don't do as many reviews and impressions anymore because I'm so busy with all my other work elsewhere, but I've been trying to get back into occasional reviews. But last year what I would do is I'd do my review and it'd be like 7 to 10 minutes of talking. And then I would just show about 7 to 10 minutes of gameplay with zero talking. The idea is like, hey, you heard my opinions. try and make your own, knowing what I said, and I would just let people take in the gameplay. So in that sense, I think people would take in the music because I like to just leave large chunks of just where people can just watch it with like forming their own opinions.
I mean, that
I
makes
like
sense.
that approach. Yeah, exactly. That's a very logical approach. I actually kind of like that. I know my own. Go ahead.
Real quick, if I may, like I think one thing I like to do, I try to do when I review games, is that there's games I love, other people are gonna hate. There's games I hate, other people are gonna love. So I try not to set my opinion in stone. I try to explain stuff in a way where people, if I dislike a game, I try to explain elements. So if it is something that would appeal to somebody, they can see my negative review but be like, hey, you may not have liked it, but the way it sounds is something I would like. So that's one of the approaches I try to take to my reviews, is like get my opinions across, but know that, hey, you could differ. And I want people who disagree with mine to learn that they could still like a game, because I think one thing with reviews is a lot of people try too hard to make it so their opinion is the fact. Like they want theirs, like, no, this game's bad, don't play it, you're gonna hate it. And I want people to be like, hey, I didn't like it, you could like it. So now you know, like, you can learn you could like something through a review of a game I dislike, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes absolute perfect sense. And actually kind of weirdly segues into my next set of questions. And then we'll wrap up here very, very quickly. But spoiler drops.
Oh, wow.
Jen, spoiler drops. What do you think? Should they be flagged? Should they be left out? Should they be included but with a warning? What do you think?
First of all, I say spoiler drops in a review is a no-go. But I understand that sometimes to report, and I was in that kind of situation before as well, you have to keep it as spoiler-free if you can avoid them as possible, and give a spoiler warning, or even say, okay, I can't continue this without maybe bringing a point across. So I'm going to say that that particular person is going to that kind of thing, and it has an impact on that story, something like that. I mean, it's not a spoiler, it's tiptoeing around. It doesn't say much, but that there is something that you can build up on to say, this is something that people definitely going to hate or not going to agree with, and I want you to be aware of that. A prominent example would be The Last of Us, maybe.
Right.
Or maybe, what else do we have? A Phoenix Wright, for example.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Pete and I are fans of the series, and I didn't agree with the victim in case number 2 of the first game, so that had an impact on me. And if you are tiptoeing around that maybe and saying, yeah, there's something happening, it's hard to avoid them sometimes. But
yeah,
I see some people, in my opinion, dropping spoilers or even showing the last end boss, even though it is blurred, to prove, hey, we made it across, like we made it to the end. And that's something that is just, it's not cool somehow.
Yeah. So would I be incorrect, or would I be correct in interpreting that for you, spoiler drops are almost the equivalent of internet points or internet clout? You know, who can drop the biggest spoiler?
Maybe. Yeah, I haven't seen that from that perspective, actually. I had always the impression that they have to show that kind of image or throw that story bit into the review to tell them, hey, I actually did it that far. I actually played it up until then. And
so
yeah,
less,
maybe
so less. Do you think it's less about clout and more about authenticity, more about I definitely did this type thing?
No, as soon as you brought it up, I think it's a mix between the two of them.
Right. Sophia, I'm going to ask you the same question. What do you think about spoiler drops in reviews? Needed, needs a warning, unneeded?
I don't like to speak in definitive, so I think
Mm-hmm.
I don't like spoilers in the reviews I'm going to read. And
Right.
so if someone's going to spoil it, I think it should be like, hey, there's spoilers here. You should say that in big bold letters at the very top of the review, not halfway through before the spoilers come in, but be like, hey, there's
Yes.
reviews here. We're going to let you know. But I think people should write towards their audience. And I think there are some audiences that do appreciate spoilers and reviews. And so I don't want to speak in this definitive way of like, no, they should never be in there, because I think it depends on who you're writing for and to. It should just be things should know. So if someone new wanders in, they know what they're getting into. So I typically try to avoid spoilers in my review. That's not something I want to do. I think there are some instances where you can't avoid touching up on certain spoilers. So for my Last of Us 2 review, there is something at the halfway point of the game. I don't spoil what it is or what leads to this, but there is something that happens to properly convey why the last half of the game failed for me. I had to explain that I had to explain why you do something. And I don't explain the narrative reason for it, but I explain a gameplay part of it. I'm trying to speak very vague here because I don't want to spoil the game for the audience listening here. And so I think there are instances where you need those, and some people may see that as a big spoiler. Some people may start assuming that, oh, this thing happens because this happens in the story, and they could be wrong. And so some people assume that they know what the spoiler is, even if it's not.
Right.
But by and large, I avoid spoilers. I know Gita Jackson, now at Vice, formerly of Kotaku, when reviewing I'm gonna blank on the game. A Nintendo game came out last year, the one with the school, Fire Emblem, the newest Fire Emblem game.
Right.
At the very top of her review, she spoils the end of the game. And it's like, why would you do that? And then she starts defending. It's like, oh, no, this was hinted at in the advertising. It's not a spoiler. But one, a lot of people avoid advertising for a reason.
Yes.
Two, it wasn't as explicit in the advertising as she made it sound. And so she spoiled a huge part of the ending, or like the last half of the game or whatever, and right in like the first or second sentence of the review. And like that's unneeded. Don't do that. And if you are, you should have something at the top right away. They may have retroactively added something in, but at the time that was just there.
Right.
And like I'm fully opposed to that unless it's marked and like your audience knows what they're getting into. But again, you need to make sure your audience, in case someone new is entering, because there's a lot of YouTubers that do spoiler reviews of games.
Yes.
Yeah.
And but people clicking on that know, because often it'll say spoiler review, or it'll say in parentheses or in bold letters spoiler. And as long as people know what they're getting into, I think everything is fair game. But when you're writing for a mainstream audience, like if IGN was to review a game and at the very first paragraph be like, so-and-so dies in this horrific fashion, it's like, okay, that sucks. Why would you do that?
Thanks.
Absolutely. And that kind of brings it to Pete. And I already know your feels, but let's say it for the audience. Spoilers in a review, specifically for you, would be Final Fantasy
Oh my goodness. Final Fantasy VII Remake, that was the worst, because I got spoiled in something that wasn't even a review.
Right.
So that article that I saw on, I think it was Kotaku, which was talking about easy mode in being too easy, actually had spoilers of locations in the game and enemies that you face later on, and I didn't want to see that because I hadn't got anywhere close to being to that point. So I knew at one point in the game...
There were no spoiler warnings.
Yeah, there was nothing. So it was like, I knew at one point I was going to come up against this particular location, and I'm not going to spoil it because... it was annoying enough for me. So, you know, you come across this location and you might get a particular difficulty from certain types of enemies, and it would annoy the heck out of me. And to be honest with you, I don't think reviews should include spoilers, but there are ways to sort of skirt around certain story beats to be able to not include a spoiler, but note that there is something that could be deemed as a spoiler to some after they've potentially played the game themselves, but they wouldn't know that at the time until they've actually played it. And I think Sophia's kind of right in that respect, that certain things, especially with certain gameplay choices that happen within that game, you do kind of have to note that there is something else going on, and there is no way to get around the fact that you might potentially spoil something. And we should know better than that, obviously, from our roundtable discussion about The Last of Us 2, where we specifically had to claim that the second half of that entire show was like, potential for spoilers. So yeah, so we didn't actually end up spoiling any of the game based on the leaks that we had seen, but there was potential that certain issues could be seen as a spoiler to people who don't want to be spoiled on literally anything. And like Sophia said, people don't look at promotional material or trailers or anything like that because they want to go in completely blind to the experience, and I have no reason to disagree with that. And I think so long as spoilers are sort of blacked out or forewarned beforehand, or in the sake of writing two separate reviews, one spoiler free and one full spoilers, which I see a lot of YouTubers, like Sophia said, doing nowadays, where it'll be people like Game Explain will do spoiler free discussions, and then the next day they'll release a chat all about the spoilers, and you know full well what you're getting in with that. So if you haven't played the game to the fullest extent, or potentially you've played some of the game but you haven't got to a certain point where things could change, you know that you can go into that blind. So I can't see why anyone in the world would put a spoiler within the first couple of lines of a review, especially when you have been given a code by a company and you're essentially pretty much giving away all that goodwill that they've entrusted in you to write a decent review for them by ruining their work of art.
My pet peeve has to do less with reviews and actually more with previews, and now this comes to the fault of game publishers themselves. And now earmuffs for people that are going to be upset at spoilers for a 10-year-old game. But heading into the release of Assassin's Creed 2, Ubisoft in Electronic Gaming Monthly, I believe, and elsewhere, like, promoted the fact that, hey, your family's going to get hung and died, and that's going to start your vengeance quest. And now that's a big dramatic moment in, like, the first few hours. And it's like, why would the publisher, or Mass Effect 2, in the lead up before the release, they let you know, oh, this cool moment in the first 10 minutes, the Normandy gets blown up, and it's like, and Shepard dies, and it's like, why would you tell us that? Why would you tell us that, game publisher? That should be this big opening that just gets us like, oh my god, what just happened? And instead publishers are like, hey, there's this big dramatic moment, we're going to spoil it for you. And it just diminishes the moment, because like playing as opening of Assassin's Creed 2, oh cool, I know his family's going to get killed. Oh cool, first minute of Mass Effect 2, I know Shepard's going to die, and that's going to lead to how I can recreate him. And it's like, why tell us that? So my ire comes at publishers, especially because now I have to focus on a lot of stuff about games. And man, publishers like to spoil stuff. Big pet peeve.
Yeah, I agree.
That's very true. Absolutely. Yeah, I've noticed this in games and movies, actually, where with the trailers, they're now putting the entire stories in trailers, and I don't understand why.
There's actually a reason for that. I think it was the director of Castaway is one of the people who actually discussed this, is that research shows that the casual audience, they don't care about spoilers, and in fact, they like to know what they're getting into. And so movie trailers will purposefully like show stuff from the third and final act of the film, because they know that the casual viewer, they're more likely to see the film if they know like main story beats than if they don't. And so now I try to avoid a lot of movie trailers, because so many movie and TV, like there's so many movie trailers I'll see, I'll be like, oh, I just felt like I watched the whole film. Cool.
Right, exactly.
But yeah,
I suppose they're advertising to the people who read the last page of a book. I don't understand people that do that either.
Oh, it's just like the people who read to the end of a review just to see the score.
Oh, yes, yes. In fact, I reviewed for a site that no longer exists now, but they did away with the numerical reviews because they figured that people weren't reading the reviews. They were just looking at the numbers at the bottom.
Mhm.
So, wow, that's an interesting perspective, but it actually explains a lot because it's been the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years where the trailers are giving the entire movie away. And I'm not a spoiler fan.
Yeah.
And now trailers are becoming like 4 minutes long, just showing
Yes!
Oh
everything.
yeah. It's,
Mhm.
I think
Absolutely.
I think the problem is that ever since they lost the movie announcer guy from trailers, that's when they started becoming more spoilerific.
Oh, I used to know his name. What was it? Oh, I can't remember. But that kind of brings us to our last little bit. We're going to get controversial now.
Yay.
We have discussed The Last of Us 2 on a previous episode, so if you're out there, you're listening, feel free to go listen to that or anything. I can't say that there'll be any spoilers in this because I don't think any of us are going to be inclined to reveal spoilers. What I want to talk about, and I want to hear everyone's view. Sophia, I'll hear yours first. So The Last of Us 2, it's a controversial game. It's a very divisive game, as you've said. The reviews that are out now, we see that, Metacritic has it at a ridiculous, percentage, and Neil Druckmann is advertising how 10 out of 10 this game is and all that kind of thing. Do you think that people have been frightened into giving 10 out of 10s? Do you think these are authentic reviews? And I would just like your thoughts on that.
I would assume some of the reviews are authentic.
Mm-hmm.
I bet there are critics out there that played it and thought, for whatever reason, it was a 10 out of 10 game.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet there's a lot of gamers that will play it and think that it's a 10 out of 10 game. So I don't want to diminish or belittle those people's point of view, because there are going to be people that love it. But as we have discussed, it is a divisive game that takes some weird narrative turns, that takes an odd gameplay choice.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, on its best day, as I said, a divisive game. And reviews should be reviews should reflect that divisiveness. But that they're all so many 10s out of 10s. Like, I mean, we're talking just 10s upon 10s upon 10s. And I think there's a lot of power in... Sony is very picky and choosy about who they give access to. Sony itself is known to blacklist. A lot of companies are known to blacklist. We have that notorious moment with Jeff Gerstmann when he gave Kanan and Lynch a bad review score in 2008 or so. But there's other stuff like Colin Moriarty once got blacklisted by Konami for a Castlevania review he gave. A lot of people don't remember this from about 2008 or 2009 or so, but Electronic Gaming Monthly, they used to be very critical in previews. The editor at the time, Dan Shu, when he took over in about the early 2000s, he always wanted, like, hey, a lot of previews for games are just press release regurgitations. It's not actually critics or journalists telling you actual opinions about games they played a preview of. They're just regurgitating publisher talking points for their access. And so EGM in the early 2000s started taking this turn where they started being critical within their previews. They'd be like, hey, we played this game early. Here's what we think. This isn't a review. Things can change, but this is how we feel based off what we played at this current time. And it was very successful because gamers want those types of opinions. What happened was, around 2008, 2009, Ubisoft started taking issue with their previews when EGM gave a bad opinion on a harsher critique of Assassin's Creed 2 based off early things they had played. And so Ubisoft blacklisted EGM, saying, we're not going to send you review codes. We're going to limit your preview access. And in this industry, access is everything. You need that access to get the most views. At the exact same time, so Dan Shu wrote an editorial about this, at the same time that they got blacklisted by Ubisoft, Sony and Midway blacklisted them over some Mortal Kombat stuff and something else. And so blacklisting happens. It happened in the late 2000s, and there's been other incidences of it happening throughout the 2010s. And so a lot of critics and people in the industry will play friendly with publishers because they want that access. And with that access isn't just review codes, which a lot of publishers will only give review codes to certain people, like the big AAA people like Sony.
Right.
But they will also, that access extends to things like preview events. And one thing that's not often talked about enough is how questionable review events are. Like there was a review event for, I think it was GTA 5, where Rockstar flew a bunch of people to a hangar in the middle of the desert, and they got to ride ATVs and go on like
That's
fun
right.
adventures, and that stuff influences what you're going to think about a game, how you report on it. And when you're getting flown to do like fun ATV events in the middle of the desert, you're going to be like, oh, I want to do that again. If I give this game a bad review, I might never get to do that again. And so people are going to want to maintain that access. I mean, we saw it with Fallout 76, where Bethesda rented out like a super fancy hotel and brought in influencers and critics. And people want to take part in that. People want to be like, oh, I want to go to the fancy hotel. I want the big fancy meal. And so that stuff influences reviews. And it's the same thing with film reviews, where people know that if you treat Disney nice, Disney's going to treat you nice. Scratch their back, they're going to scratch yours. And I mean, there's critics who have since come out about like, hey, these publishers took me to super fancy restaurants for steak meals and all this stuff. And that stuff influences what you're going to report on about a game. And so when we talk about The Last of Us 2, and I'm sorry this went on such a long tangent, but when we talk about The Last of Us 2, there's a lot of people that know that, hey, if I give this game a bad review, I'm going to lose that sweet, sweet Sony access. And other things that come with that access are critics will be sent super fancy, one-of-a-kind collector's editions.
Yes.
And I mean, like, you can actually, an interesting thing, a little peek behind the curtain, every now and then look up, go on to second hand sellers like eBay and stuff and look up critic review whatever edition, and you will sometimes see like, so there was a game I reviewed when I was at Niche Gamer. It was gonna blank on what it was called. It was a combination of like Trials, like HD, you know. It was like Trials and I'm totally gonna blank on what this game is called, but it was like just a little indie game.
Was it a double pack?
No, it was one game. It was like a combination of. Hold on, let me. Excuse me as I type in my computer. I'll pull up this game.
No, you're fine. Absolutely, we do that too.
Yeah.
It's a very organic show, live as it happens.
But I think like this game I gave. I think I gave it like a 6.5 or something. Like it was okay, but the going around, and disclosure, I never got one of these. Oh, cool! Niche Gamer removed my author page. I've had a falling out with Niche Gamer because of
Oh dear.
Anyways, I forget. I'm totally blanking on the name of the game. My apologies. But one of the things they mailed out to some critics, and again, I wasn't one of them, and I would probably turn this away because I think this stuff is really super shady.
Yeah.
But they were sending like, it was this enclosed package that came with, I think there was liquor in it and like super fancy box, and they were sending that one of a kind. They only made so many of these, and for critics, and they would send those to some critics, and those type of gifts influence reviews. So just as the access to preview events, the access to review, the access to one of a kind special editions, that stuff changes how you're gonna review a game. You're gonna like, hey, if you're reviewing a game, maybe you think it's an 8, but hey, you know Sony's really going to like if you give it a 10. Maybe you'll add those 2 extra points and just not talk about certain things. Right. And so I do think we see a lot of that. And I think for a game so divisive, I think the reviews of The Last of Us 2 show 2 things. It shows, one, people aren't going to be hypercritical of Sony games. I mean, we see that with most Sony first-party games that they often get those 9s and 10s, and not all of those games are 9s and 10s. But then also, I think it also shows the ideological one-sidedness of the gaming media. And I mean, as we talk about it, earlier, my Click article, or before my editor-in-chief yells at me, Click, as I'm supposed to pronounce.
Oh, right.
But as that article shows, is that they are actively gatekeeping people out of the industry at these main sites who don't align with their point of view. And so when you get that ideological one-sidedness, reviews are going to reflect that as well. Hence, this divisive game that kind of in some ways panders to certain audiences. 10 out of 10. I mean, when they're taking this game and saying it's the Schindler's List of video games, like that's insane. Especially because there's a lot of narrative issues and plot holes in that game too. And I think the reviews, again, I'm not going to say they're all disingenuous. There's going to be genuine ones. But to answer your question, yes, I think a good portion of them are disingenuous, overinflated, be it for a variety of reasons. Hopefully all that explanation made sense. I know I went on a few tangents, but like to properly convey just how messed up the stuff at the mainstream sites are. And I think that's why, again, the reviews that go, oddly enough, as much as I hate Vice Games and Cameron Kunzelman, I think, who wrote it, the review of the Vice Games review of Last of Us 2 is one of the better reviews I read, that I actually agree with large segments of it, even after playing the game. And I think, but they don't give it a critical score. And when you go through the Metacritic page, the reviews that were most critical of that game, Polygon, Kotaku, Vice Games, and a few others, the ones without review scores have that freedom to be more critical. But every site that has a score, they play into the Metacritic Sony access system.
That's a very valid point. And actually, I'll be doing a critique this week, or be published this week, about The Last of Us Part 2, and it does not have a numerical score. And part of that is because I have a freedom to say whatever I think or feel about this game. Meanwhile, we'll have two contrasting reviews that are numerically based. So that kind of brings the same question. Jen, I'll ask you, what do you think about... I'll rephrase it a bit, because I've asked you this question actually before a couple episodes ago, but peer pressure in reviews. Do you think that's a tangible thing? You think people are being peer pressured into reviews, or are these coming from the heart?
It's a hard question, actually. And of course I have some maybe naive kind of points of views, but I often have the impression that if you are writing for a bigger site and not doing it, for a smaller outlet, you have to be careful even more, and how to rephrase something, and also how people are going to react online, because our internet culture is as harsh as it ever has been before, and you can get picked apart for little things. We established this over the whole episode, but sometimes, of course, just with me overly being critical, and I read other people's reviews very, very strict and very critical, because I just want to know how they attempt it, and if they are going to tiptoe around about something. But I think there's a lot of pressure, and also, you have to get those games out and can't take your sweet time with it when you are for reviewing for a bigger outlet. So, pressure is something that many people don't handle actually well, and it shows in various colors, sometimes with a little bit of sloppiness, sometimes with a little bit of softening everything. So it's hard to say at some point.
Right.
But pressure is something that's never good, and if you can't handle it very well while writing for bigger outlets or doing YouTube reviews, the thing that Sophia mentioned with some goodies and stuff is actually very common also in the beauty industry and on YouTube. It's hard to find someone that you can trust, especially in that kind of métier, which is steering a little bit away from the original topic here, video games. But there are a lot of factors going on behind the scenes, and I wish there wouldn't be there. So it's sometimes really hard to find the genuine ones. And pressure also leads people to, and before rambling on and making the point several times the same, leading people into doing something they wouldn't have if they have some more time in various forms. I don't want to accuse anyone of doing something like that and saying everyone is going to soften out their scores, or everyone is going to not cover as much as they could because of pure pressure or something like that. I don't want to do something like that, but I wish many things would be different. And I have the impression that pressure is a huge factor in that kind of thing in various forms that is catering to us in a very wrong way.
If I could jump in real quick.
Sure.
The game of the audience is called Steel Rats.
Mm.
And then we can maybe put this in the episode description, but I just want you to of a tweet that shows the press kit where it's thanking the studio for the press kit they got. That is it's a gas can with liquor and 2 glasses inside.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's these press kit gifts they give certain people that again are gonna cause that influence because they're gonna want those gifts. These are fancy one of a things that if you hold on to long enough can be worth something later. It's I mean, this is a small indie game that'll never be worth a lot, but when if you're getting exclusive press kits for say The Last of Us, a very popular game, even through its divisiveness, that's something that can be sold later. That's something that is a rare collector's edition, and that really does cause so much influence, and I don't think it's something enough people talk about.
Fair point.
I think that's a very fair point because I'm somewhat of apparently a Bethesda fangirl, which I do not wear that mantle proudly. But going back to Fallout 76, there was the people that pre-ordered Fallout 76 could get a bag, I believe.
Oh my goodness, that was a debacle in its own right.
Yeah, and it was very expensive, but they were not given their bags, and yet the influencers, mostly Instagram influencers, that were given pre-release of the game were given like leather bags that were like beautiful luxury items. And I think that just really goes to speak to how they knew it was a bad game. And they were really, okay, I shouldn't say that. That's terrible. That was purely me. But they were pushing for that influential, score. So Pete, falls to you. What about pure pressure to, give the game a good score? I know we've talked about it plenty of times, but specifically in The Last of Us Part 2.
I do feel that there are certain cliques within, cliques, however you want to pronounce it. I know Sophia's going to get in trouble if she keeps pronouncing it apparently wrong. But it's so... I think that there are definitely cliques around in the gaming industry, especially when it comes to certain reviewers, certain outlets, certain things like that, where if they see an outlet like Kotaku giving a 10 out of 10, then they feel like they must be obliged to give a 10 out of 10, because then everyone's just going to literally dunk on them for giving anything less than Kotaku did, or Polygon did, or VG247 did. And to be honest with you, I could go into the whole thing about VG247 and their shambolic reporting of certain things and all of that, but I won't for today. But
Separate show. We
Yeah,
will do.
I do worry that there is this sort of peer pressure within the games industry that if you do give it a bad score, then like Sophia said, you're blacklisted by Sony, by in films by Disney, and there are various outlets out there who have been banned. There are various people out there who've been blacklisted from the industry. Unsurprisingly and weirdly enough, like he still gets access for them, but Jim Sterling apparently is blacklisted from quite a lot of outlets, and it's
That's surprising.
I know, but I think some of it. Well, for him, it was Gearbox because of his scathing review of Colonial Marines.
I'll watch my words here, but when it comes to Jim Sterling, a lot of his stuff is performative, and now obviously people know that about the
agreed.
character.
Yes.
So I'm not speaking to that obvious, but there is stuff that I've been told about this person that I can't reveal.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
there is a very performative nature to Jim Sterling. Very much does have a lot of access that he just sometimes sweeps under the rug, we'll say.
I'm not overly surprised by that because he does seem to have a lot of insider information with various certain sources, and one of those sources could be Laura Kate Dale, to be fair, and he makes no bones about the fact that he works very closely with her. So
I mean,
I meant with publishers. He sells a lot of publisher friends.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't want to comment on that without anything going on, because it might be unfounded. It might be we can't back the claim up at all, and I wouldn't want you to obviously reveal sources or where you may have heard it from, but it doesn't surprise me at all, despite the fact that he's been in the industry for a very long time and people don't seem to like him, yet he still gets his access. So it's just it's odds. But if I think a lot of it will probably fall on, and I hate to take this in the political sphere, but if you are very politically leaning towards their viewpoints, then you're basically in the clique. Whereas if obviously you don't adhere to those mentalities, then you're not really going to get the access from all these various outlets or various different places who are giving you codes, and you could essentially be blacklisted. So I do feel like there is a lot of peer pressure, especially when it does come to certain big games, and I think people didn't get the memo of Death Stranding, because I think that was supposed to be that case, but it just didn't happen. And it's very odd, because it'll be very interesting to see actually next month when Ghost of Tsushima comes out, and see whether or not that is still the case with a first-party Sony title getting potentially 90, 95, 96, or whether or not it goes down as much as 85 to 90. And I think that will see the disconnect between this whole thing, really.
Right. Well, we're kind of coming to an end of our sojourn, but it's been a very enjoyable ride. Jen and Pete, do you have any questions for our lovely, lovely guest, Sophia?
Peter's probably waiting for me to say something, but I'm waiting for Pete to say something.
No, it's because
I should have said specifically.
Yeah, no, well, Kylie's caught me off guard because I didn't think this was going to happen. So,
I just wanted to be sure I didn't leave any of y'all's points out.
Yeah.
Or stuff like that. But it's been an amazing opportunity. We do appreciate Sophia very much for stopping by. And
I appreciate you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. We've enjoyed it very much, beginning to end.
Yeah, we really do appreciate you coming out and being able to discuss all of this with us. You know, you are a pretty prominent person within the industry, despite all the blacklisting and all that sort of thing. And it's very so interesting to just see like your perspectives on it from, you know, from your angle, and obviously ours from a very much a smaller outlet.
I think what's weird is that I am considered this prominent voice now, because
you are.
Up until I know I am, but it's still weird because up until about 2.5 years ago, I hadn't written anything in about a decade. I was medically retired from the military when I was about 20, and I just kind of wasted away for a good while. And so eventually I've always had this passion for writing. Even in the military, I was training to be a multimedia broadcaster and journalist. So there's always been this part of me that wanted to do this stuff. And so I just eventually started cracking down and writing. And like I was, nothing happens overnight. So I was really languishing for about a year and a half. And I really didn't catch my break until like I had really good stories before last August. Like I had my Zoe Quinn expose about her failed game. I had sources from her game talk to me. I had something on author Blake Harris, who had been blacklisted and kind of faced a bunch of stuff, but I never really had like that big story until this coming August will have been 1 year since I broke the ESA League, and that's really kind of what skyrocketed to attention. And so like it's funny, like I have like 40,000 followers on Twitter now.
That's amazing.
I'm a senior editor and social media at a global news org, and like so like I know I have this prominent, but it's like deep down I know I'm still this same dorky kind of small girl. People just like some of the stuff I say, but like I don't really have this like elitist or like I'm on a pedestal kind of view. Like you guys, like I'm really no different. Like, and I say this genuinely, like I'm really no different than you guys. Like I still like I may have found like been able to create a platform for myself, but I'm not this like oversized thing contrary to what it looks like. I'm just some girl who spends way too much time sitting at my desk chair playing games, shit posting, and writing.
That sounds right perfectly up our alley.
I think that sounds pretty much like all of us, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Exactly. But we.
I was just gonna say, like, no joke, like 90% of my days is just here in my desk chair, surrounded by my monitors, usually with a game on, and just way too much time on Twitter.
That's the life, though. That's the way it should be. Oh, gosh. Well, this has been one of the more entertaining episodes. And I don't say that lightly because we've put out some really good ones. But this has been a wonderful experience. I'm going to go around the table and, again, ask for everyone's kind of where they can find you and all that kind of stuff. So, Pete, I'll start with you. Give us a little bit of your background and where they can find you.
Okay, well, I would say thanks for having me on, but I'm always on, so obviously that's just a weird thing. Yeah, but outside of obviously the podcast, you can find my reviews at Rapid Reviews UK. I've got one coming up about hopefully next week, so long as Kylie finishes the video editing stuff for me. For Streets of Rage 4. I won't give spoilers on what I think about the game because people have still been asking me, and I won't say. But other than that, I'm on Twitter at PeteBeckett1, which is the number 1, and other than that, it's just you'll find me around, just doing my thing.
Jen, what about you? Where can we find you and on Twitch and such?
Yeah, I am mostly active on Twitter at lady_sugarcube, or you can hear me. Yeah, we're recording on Sunday, and as soonish the episode is going up at Caffeinated BC. Also, I am writing for Rapid Reviews, also Mike Tendo64, and yeah, like I said, Cities blog, Walk in Shadows, and also, yeah, I try to regularly stream random kind of videos on Twitch, Lady Sugar Cube there. But everything is on my bio on Twitter, so if you want to check that out, you are welcome to. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me again.
I was going to say, I highly encourage everyone to go follow Jen.
Yeah, I recommend the streams because watching her play Pizza Game, putting all these voices on was great. It was really fun.
It's so hard for a non-English speaker to do that kind of stuff, and then there are typos and everything. But I love the game. It's fun. It's so random. It is. A perfect mirror of myself.
Yeah, it was the weird one for me was obviously the guy that's on the larger side of things, and you're actually talking like you got a mouthful of spaghetti.
Oh, that's brilliant! Excellent. Well, Sophia, let's hear where we can find you one more time.
All right, my name is Sophia Narwitz. You can find me on Twitter at SophNar0747 on Twitter. On YouTube, just look up Sophia Narwitz to find my channel. I write at rt.com. You can just do a name search there and find my stuff. And I'm usually around on a few other random things here and there. I used to be a primary writer for Colin Moriarty, and while that recently ended just due to us going different paths with our careers, I still have a bunch of good videos up on his stuff under his side quest banter, and you can you can find my stuff there. But I'm usually just around, and then I've previously written at places like Niche Gamer and whatever else, but please use an archive if you read those, because F that site.
Yeah. That's interesting to discover. But we definitely thank you for stopping by. I'm speaking for everyone, but we very much enjoyed Sophia's visit. Also, if for some reason you want to follow me, I mostly tweet about autism and facing a autism diagnosis. And that is at Kylie Tegreet, KILEYTEHGREET on Twitter. And then you can find all my other stuff via that. But thank you, audience, for stopping by and giving us a listen. We do not have sponsors. We are only active because of you guys out there, the community out there. And we appreciate it when you give us a like or a share or a review. I have been your co-host, Kylie Wild, and this has been a fabulous, enjoyable roundtable discussion about journalism. Thank you for tuning in to Rapid Reviews Radio Podcast, which is a supplement to the Rapid Reviews UK website, where we review AAA and indie games. So stop by and give us a read. So thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we will talk to you next week.